Hi, I'm Kelly Vaughn, and this is Inside Indy. And this evening we're going to tackle a very controversial issue. It makes people a little uncomfortable, but that's what we're about here on Inside Indy, because we want to talk about the issues that are real. We want to address them, and we want to help you to understand the issues and impact your life. And racism, of course, it's topping our headlines across the country, and here to help us understand some of those issues and the understandings behind racism. It's a book called Black: Beliefs Limiting Authentic Cultural Knowledge, and George Middleton is the author. You are a mental health counselor here in Indianapolis, and you're also a very well-known pianist in our community, jazz artist. George Middleton, welcome to the show.
You are too kind. Thank you, and thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on board. You know, I've seen you perform over the years as a jazz artist, never thought about you being a writer. So how did this book, Black, come into being?
Right. Well, yeah, just a short, brief history on me is, yes, I graduated from the Indiana University School of Music. Mm-hmm. And initially I didn't go right into my passion for music, because I tried to do the safe thing, according to my parents, and get a real job. Mm-hmm. Right, so I could have something to fall back on in case I didn't go platinum, okay? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Which I haven't gone platinum yet. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay.
But you have in Indianapolis. See, okay. It's all relative. What is platinum?
That's true. That's
true.
Okay, well, I'll take that. I received that. So anyway, when I got into the corporate environment, I'm thinking that's the safe environment, and I soon found out that the corporate environment is a very violent environment. You know, just because you're wearing a shirt and a tie and you got, you know, a couple of degrees and people are speaking, you know, properly, it is a very violent place, and it's about conformity. And if you don't fit in that mainstream of conformity, then your outcomes are going to be equivalent to your ability to fit in. And so, because of my lack of awareness at that stage of my life, it tested some of my internal triggers, things that I didn't really understand about myself, and it also expressed or displayed perceptions of others on how they saw me, how they perceived me, and the way they responded to me. And it took a few years of me bumping my head to realize, wow, I'm continually engaging in this type of repetitive, negative pattern of conflict. And at first I was saying, them, you know, why are they doing this to me? But after about the fifth scenario, I had to stop and realize, hey, what am I doing to continually get in this situation? And about that time, I started getting into the field of mental health, which really allowed me to start being more self-reflective and look at my issues versus looking at someone else. And once I was able to start being more open and honest about who I was, then I started to see this connecting theme with myself, with the clients that I work with, when I'm in the juvenile system, when I'm in the Department of Child Services, when I'm in the school systems, and it's racism. Racism is that continual stressor that permeates whatever system that you're in. It's intricately involved with racism. So that's what sparked me to write the book, because the book premises racism from a mental health issue versus a fight the power issue, the traditional way that we try to address racism externally. What this book does is challenges the reader to go internal and find out their own relationship with racism. Because regardless of what color you are, if you're looking through the prism of color as your life platform, it is probably causing you to do some ineffective behaviors, some ineffective thought processes, which end up displaying themselves in activities and actions that can be harmful to yourself, harmful to the community, emotionally, mentally, and physically.
So is this a self-help book to help people see if they're racist or not? Is that what?
No.
No.
We are in a country founded on racism.
Okay.
So some people don't want to acknowledge that. Mm-hmm. So self-help book, I think that's part of it. But at this point, I think everybody knows there's a shift going on in our country. So there's a battle going on in general between just the country and what it says it stands for, what it believes in, but then there's a gap between that statement and then what they're actually doing. And then there's an issue more specifically to our community, because we're still in 2017, a continual state of protest, asking for consideration, asking for fair treatment, in 2017, right? And so we're all realizing, hey, something is not working. And, you know the definition of insanity.
Yeah.
Okay. So this book is a strong attempt at doing something different. There's a lot of great initiatives that are going on dealing with our community, dealing with our youth, dealing with families, dealing with education, dealing with a variety of systemic pieces. But it's all externally based. To really make long-lasting change, you need to go internal, because it's the mind shift. You can't solve the problem with the same mind that you used to create the problem.
Okay.
So to change the problem, you have to change your mind.
But you have to have an open heart and an open mind, and to be able to perhaps face something ugly that's inside of you. Is that?
Right, and even that is subjective. An open heart and open mind, everybody has their own definition of what they think open heart and open mind is. But it's generally very difficult to lie to yourself, right? So if you ask yourself the right questions, that's the challenge, is asking the right questions to get the right answers. So if you ask yourself the right questions, your body's going to tell you if you're being honest with it or not. And it's not so much important for you to admit it to me as much as it's important for you to admit it to yourself. Because I think that's one of the issues in our communities. We keep looking for these tangible, I have to see it, touch it, outcomes, when so many of our issues are qualitative. They're on the inside. It's taken generations, years, weeks, months to create this condition. And in America, we have that, give it to me now issue. I want the solution now. I want proof now, over something that has taken a lifetime to develop.
Okay, so tell us how you looked into yourself and things that you have seen and have solved within yourself.
Well, my last
Or resolved.
my last corporate or organized work environment position really taught me a lot. It was just a clash of paradigms. Where I was working, was demonstrably effective. I had broken records with the objectives that we were set to accomplish. I thought I was really on a track for upward and mobile promotion. But what I didn't realize is that the perception of me was far different than what I was actually doing. And it would be easy for me to stop and say, well, they just didn't give me a chance. They weren't this, they weren't that. But when I look back over it, and this was like the 5th time I'd gone through this type of conflict, I sat down and said, George, what are you going to do to no longer get in this position? Because it's costly, right? It costs you income, it costs you reputation, it costs you advancement. So what am I going to do? Am I going to be happy just sitting here blaming somebody for my failure? So I had to figure out a different way of doing this. And so when it made me look at it differently, it made me use a lot of the mental health interventions that I use in working with clients. I had to use that on myself. And so once I looked at it differently, I responded differently. And so I no longer walk into this emotional minefield of racism and perception, because I'm aware now of it. And I'm aware of how my triggers are. So I know how to prevent it. I know how to reduce areas that I can reduce. And I know how to respond to a person who I know is responding to me that way, in a way that does not make them an issue for me.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Because I'm back at the job where you were supposed to get the promotion,
Right.
and even though you understand, I'm like, I still think. Do you still deserve the money?
I took a hit. I took a hit. I took a hit in so many areas, but a lot of times, how life is when you're at your lowest. That's when it's time for you to decide what you're really about. And so even though, I could really be angry about that, that was something I would have never learned about myself had I not experienced that. I wish I would not have, some people say if I had it to do all over again, I would do it. No, I would not. But if that was the only way for me to learn about myself, then I guess that's what was needed.
Okay. In your book, you break it down into family, school, and church. Cultural performance comparison, spiritual authenticity assessment. So are you advocating this book as a tool for churches, for schools,
Right.
to learn and overcome the issues of racism?
That's correct, because my goal for the book, it's an action book. It's not a book to just put on a coffee table, have a nice, cup of coffee or your favorite drink and put on some music. It's really meant to make you uncomfortable, to challenge yourself. And I really want to challenge systems that are in the human services, which is education, mental health, law enforcement, even politics, because we're serving people. And how you see people based on color, how you see yourself based on color, it's so subconscious in many of us that we're responding and writing policy in ways that we think is normal when really it's not. And once you start to awaken your own awareness of how you're perceiving black, how you're perceiving white, now you're able to make intentional decisions versus knee-jerk and triggered decisions.
Wow. Okay. So you recommend this read for whom?
I recommend it for everyone. I recommend it for parents who have black males. I recommend it for parents who have white children. Even though the book is titled Black, it is not intended to be only for black, because the acronym of black is dealing with the beliefs about color. And then limiting, because of your beliefs in color, it limits you from where you authentically are from. So one of the questions that I start out with in the book is, and if you want to answer it, you can. If you don't, you don't
Okay.
have to. Are you your color, or are you your culture?
Both.
Okay.
But I look at my culture as being my color too.
Okay. And so what makes your color a culture?
What makes my color a culture? Experience with the people around me who are of the same color.
How would you describe those experiences?
They vary. If you're talking about musically, and I get to go hear George Middleton play, that's a very cool experience.
Is that specific? Is that specific to your particular culture, or is that when you talk about that particular experience, is that a culture? Is that an experience that goes across cultures?
Oh, wow, that's a heavy question, and actually one that I'm out of time to answer.
Okay.
But I appreciate the challenge. See, I love this. And of course, you all should pick up the book. It's Black Beliefs Limiting Authentic Cultural Knowledge by George Middleton, who's a mental health counselor and a jazz pianist here in the Indianapolis area. Where can we get it? Amazon?
It's available at Amazon. That's
Okay.
correct.
Okay. Well, thank you, George.
It's a pleasure.
You have to come back, and we'll do part 2.
Okay, I look forward to it.
Okay, thanks for joining us on
Appreciate
Inside Indy. And when we come back, more on mental health issues with Kimball Richardson next. And we're back here on Inside Indy, and joining us now is Kimball Richardson. And Kimball is a licensed counselor and manager of business development for Community Health Network.
Yes, ma'am.
Welcome, Kimball.
you. Thanks for
You've
having me
become our
back.
mental health expert here on
I
Inside
really
Indy.
appreciate it. I always enjoy talking with you, Kelly.
And I often think of you when there's a major national story going on, and I think, what would Kimball say about this?
Well, that's nice.
So I wanted to bring up one of the biggest stories in recent weeks, the mass killings in Las Vegas.
Right.
Want to do a psychological analysis of shooter Stephen Paddock, in terms of what happened, the healing process for those involved. I just had a lot of questions, and I think when we were watching it on television, we all had questions like, what's really going on here?
Why?
Yeah, and again, he's just serving as an example for any case like this, whether it be a past situation, heaven forbid, a future situation.
Right.
One of the things that intrigued me about a case like this is that they've been trying to reach for a cause of why he did what he did. And then you have the relatives who were involved, or whether they were close, some were close, some not so close, or they had the girlfriend. And their response has been, he's very normal. There's nothing wrong with him. And I don't necessarily want you to make a judgment about that, but I guess I'm personally, and I'm sure there are other people who aren't convinced of that.
Sure.
So when you're that close to someone, what is that when we're blinded by our love for them? Does that make sense what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's very normal that anybody would want to understand why this would happen for several reasons. One is because we have a need to make sense of it, make sense of something that's senseless. But it helps us to feel more secure when we can have an answer like it happened for this reason, so that number one, we can understand it, get our mind around it, and number two, see if we can predict and prevent it from happening in the future, which of course is important. In these cases, especially when the person has died, we'll never know 100%. We can only put some of the pieces back together. But to specifically answer your question, sometimes your normal is not my normal. My normal is not your normal. So what I mean by that is when people are close to someone who commits such a heinous crime, they may think that's all they know is how this person acts. So they don't seem any different to them than what they normally would. So they may not think that there's anything out of the unusual going on. Okay. Except for, like, say you or I might meet the person and be like, this is not right. There's something.
But is it because they're so close to them? And what about being close to somebody keeps us from seeing what may be obvious to others?
Right. Well, when we are close to people, a lot of times we love them despite their faults. And that's part of loving somebody, of course, is you love the whole person. And we like to think that, good people can do bad things. And that that's not all that they are. But when someone, purposefully murders so many people, it really is difficult to understand why they would do that.
I think of some of the cases, though, where, say, someone has killed 3 or 4 people, and then the mom in court goes, "That's my baby."
Of course.
No, he just killed 5 people.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is just really irritating. Now, I don't have a problem with her loving her son.
Correct.
I want her to say, he killed 5 people, and this is terrible, but I still love my son.
Right.
I get that.
Right.
I don't get the denial.
Well, the denial, what denial is we call it a defense mechanism. That's the technical name for it, if you will. And what denial does is it keeps us from emotionally being impacted by the truth. And sometimes people can't stand, literally they can't take it. They wouldn't be able to withstand the truth. And so denial keeps, it protects us in a way. Denial sometimes starts when we need our psychology or our ego, if you will, our self, needs to be protected from the reality of what's happening. Just like someone who, as a child, may be getting abused, they may say, this person is not trying to hurt me, they really love me. And in that moment, that protects that person from the reality is that this person is abusing me, and maybe, so I think denial does help people, but in the long run, it's not helpful. And when that's maybe your only coping skill or coping mechanism, it's not helpful because then you never really get to face the truth and then find out what your options are to heal.
So there's a possibility, though, then over time, once the reality sinks in, your perception could change.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so people do have to grapple with if you're related to this person who commits a terrible crime.
Can't
what
imagine.
does that mean? What does that mean about our relationship? What does that mean about me as a person? Could this be catching? You know, how are people going to look at me? All those things happen too. Now, of course, it's not all about you. We really have to focus on the victims and their loss and suffering. But at some point, people do look inward and try to think, how could we miss this? What could we have done to prevent it? Or you hope that that's what they're thinking.
Okay, yeah, and I think about the girlfriend, I think it was Mary Lou Dunley, who said that he seemed very normal, yet there were people who around them said that he saw him being abusive toward her. There were accounts of that, and so that made me question what she could tell me, because if you don't see your boyfriend as battering you as a problem, and you didn't bring that up, I'd say, yeah, he was abusive to me, but I can't imagine him doing that.
Well,
but I don't think that came out that way.
Just like I said, people have different definitions of normal. Sometimes people who are in abusive relationships and they're being abused, that's their normal. And they also, if you want to use the word denial, they don't see the abuse as being hurtful or harmful. They see it as, sometimes they'll see it as, well, this person is paying attention to me, or this is their way of showing me affection, and they discount it. Because if they face the reality, they have to leave the relationship. Maybe it's all that they have. Maybe this person's all they know. Maybe they don't feel worthy of something better or different.
Okay.
So,
how do people who've been through this kind of tragedy cope?
Unfortunately, we know through experience that people can live and survive through almost unimaginable situations. And we've had things like this, ever since the beginning of recorded time. But here recently, we know about it a lot more because of course it's in the media, and we know about it as it's happening sometimes.
And I think we think too, like it shouldn't be happening. Like we ought to know better now today, because we've like arrived. We're ahead of our ancestors, right?
Well,
kind of, yeah.
You'd like to think.
Think that, right?
But I think several things. We really want to make sure that people have a very good support system intact, whether they have family or friends, but also, of course, professional mental health counselors, clergy, peer support. All of those things are so helpful. And sometimes it takes time to recover from something like that. It's really difficult to get your mind around what happened to you.
And I would think, get help. It's okay to reach out to get help.
Of course, my profession is in behavioral health, so I understand, and I support and advocate for people to get help as quickly as possible. We know that early psychological intervention can sometimes stave off later problems like post-traumatic stress disorder, difficulty working, difficulty in relationships, stuff like that. So it is helpful.
Okay, well, we're out of time. I want to talk some more because I have more questions, but I can't. I got to go.
Well, maybe I'll have to come back.
You have to come back.
I'll have to come back.
And you're always welcome here. We appreciate you giving us the information and the insight on these issues, and I appreciate you coming in. Kimball Richardson, who's with the Community Health Network.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thanks so much for being with us on Inside Indy, and thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Kelly Vaughn. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.